If you've been building websites or trying to learn how to code, you've probably heard of Bootstrap 5. And at Coder Foundry, we think Bootstrap 5 is nothing short of awesome. We use it all throughout our course, and that's one of the reasons we teach it at learn.coderfoundry.com. One of the things that we get asked to build a lot is carousels with some kind of like 3-tier pricing structure. I'm going to show you how to build that in Bootstrap 5. And guess what? I'm not going to have any JavaScript and no custom CSS, completely all Bootstrap 5. So let's take a look as we build the Bootstrap 5 pricing page. So you can see here I've got this carousel running and it automatically changes the page, but I also have these arrows here that can go back and forth between the images that I have. I also have a little navigation down here as well. So this works really nice when you have multiple images that you want to display on a page or whatever. I'm using the carousel here for this particular page to give you some different marketing tips here. You know, the freshest app, you know, we have app storage, and then from our farm to your table, and then our free delivery with any paid plan. Also down here, I have 3 cards that I'm using, Bootstrap cards, to lay out the different pricing options. Now you'll see this a lot, whether it be like a service or some kind of app-based pricing tier. We're doing the exact same thing here. So if you ever called on to build one of these pages, I think this tutorial here today can go a long way in getting you able to build these home pages for people. Anyway, so let's jump into the code here. Just kill this. And if you're new to this, if you're watching this on YouTube or something like that, or if you're new to the course and you just jumped in here, we're going to go ahead and create a folder, and we're going to use VS Code to build this. And we're going to use our standard project layout. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a folder, and I'm just going to call this pricing page. You can call it whatever you want. All right, and then I'm going to just kill that, and then what I'm going to do is get out of that, and then I'm just going to open a folder here, because you know in VS Code everything is built on folders, and I'm using my documents code folder here, and I'm going to open that pricing page right now. Now what I'm going to do is show you my standard layout. If this is the first time you've seen this, I'm going to go ahead and act like this is the first time you've seen it, and our new standard layout here with all of our front-end type projects are, we're going to have a JS folder to store JavaScript. Create a new folder here. I'm going to call it image, and then I'm going to create another folder called CSS in case I want to have some custom CSS and image in here. And then today we're going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html, and this is where all of our work will take place. Now if you notice here, we have a lot of extensions installed here, so if you're using some of our extensions, just go to our VS intro on learn.coderfoundry.com if you want to know the extensions we're using. We have several in here. One of them that we use quite a bit is our in-house extension called BS. Is our Bootstrap 5 extension. And the way you can start that is BSCF-template. So I'll leave in, if you want to know how to install that, it's pretty easy. Just go to the Visual Studio Marketplace and look up Bootstrap 5 and find the Coder Foundry one. But today we're going to pick template base, and what it does right away is basically creates us an HTML page, and it links in our Bootstrap CSS that we're going to use. And I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of all of this in the center here. So now we just have a body tag, HTML tag, a header tag, and we're all set and ready to go. So I'm going to change the title here, and we'll call it pricing page. You can put demo if you want, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to say farm fresh, because we're going to use a fresh fruits and vegetable as our example here. So we'll call it Farm Fresh. That's the name of our fictitious company here, Farm Fresh pricing page. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a div. Now, we all know divs don't really do anything. This basically allows us to tell us that something inside of this is going to be separated from the rest of the content. They also stack upon each other as well. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a class to this, and I'm going to call it container class. And I'm going to add a thing called container fluid here. Now, containers and container fluids set up the basic structure for anything, any elements that you want to put inside of it. And so every page should have a container. Now, container fluid basically goes end to end. Okay, it's going to make it full screen. Container by itself will just give us gutters on the side, left and right, and kind of center it in the page. We're going to use fluid today because we want this carousel that we're going to create to fill up all the space on the width. All right, so let's get started building our first carousel. Now, if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, I'm going to go over here and go to Carousel Bootstrap 5. I want you to know that there's a lot of components in here, and the documentation is some of the best in the world. So if you want to learn more about the carousel after you watch this tutorial, you can. And just go in here. It's complete with code examples, the whole 9 yards. It makes it very easy to get started with Bootstrap if you haven't done it. And you can see there's a lot of things going on here that the carousel we're going to do. We're going to cover most of those today, but not everything. So make sure that you're on Bootstrap 5, the latest version, when you're looking at it. All right. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is I'm going to add another div in here, and this div is going to hold our carousel. Now, every carousel that you create needs a custom ID. So I'm going to give it one. And I'm going to call it custom carousel header. Now, you can call it whatever you want, custom carousel pricing, carousel, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter what you do, but whatever you call it, we're going to use this ID throughout our code from here on out. So just make sure that it's something that you remember or that you spell correctly or something like that. Now, the other thing I'm going to add is a class to this. And of course, Bootstrap is built on classes, and we're going to add 2 classes to this. And we're going to add the carousel class and then slide. And these are the 2 that you need to make your carousel to work. Let me make sure I've got this spelled right. Carousel, carousel. And then also need this one, bs.ride. And so this sets up our basic carousel. All right, so this is just to make sure that you have all 3 of these elements in to set your carousel up properly. These are required by Bootstrap, and this right here is something that you name your individual carousel. I recommend that you start with the word carousel and then add a name to the carousel that you want to call it afterwards. That's the naming convention I follow. I think you should do the same thing. All right, so that doesn't really get us anywhere. So the next thing that we have to do inside our carousel is we're going to set up the indicators. All right, so if you remember, our indicators are these little arrows right here that tell us that there's somewhere we can click on. And we also have these buttons down here at the bottom that also drive interaction. So we're going to set up these buttons and these arrows. All right. So let's get going to do that real quick. So far, haven't done a whole lot. Pretty easy though. So I'm going to create another div inside of this one. And then I'm going to give it a class. And it's going to be called Carousel dash indicators. Okay. Now this is required by Bootstrap. It's a Bootstrap class. And in here, I'm going to create those buttons along the bottom. All right. So I'm going to create a button. And then I'm going to give it some classes here. So I'm going to say, well, first off, we'll say it's a type is equal to button. And then I'm going to give it a target. Now this is required by Bootstrap for it to work. And what we're going to use here is the name of this header here. Okay. So I'm going to say hashtag Carousel header. Notice they're spelled the same way with the hashtag there. This hooks this button up to this carousel. If you spell this wrong or something like that, it just means your buttons won't work. So if you're getting where your buttons aren't like moving the slide forward or backwards or not navigating to the correct thing, check this first to make sure that your data BS target is set in there. And the other thing that you have to do is tell it what slide this button operates on. And if you know anything about arrays, we're going to start with the first one, and arrays start with 0. So I'll show you how this works in a second, but each button should have a unique number to the slide that it's going to, and in this case we're going to go to the first one, which is 0. So it's data BS slide 2, and this is something required by Bootstrap as well. Okay, so finally we're going to get to our class, and everyone that you kind of create at this point, every button, one of them needs to be set to active, and then if it's after that, Bootstrap will handle what button it's set into active. But you need to at least get one of the buttons set to active, and I recommend that you do the first one. All right, so it'll start with the first one and go. We can also set this current equals true. We need to do that. And then we're going to set up this area label, which just helps with assistance. And our first one is going to be farm fresh produce. Now I know what my slides are going to be as we looked earlier, but we'll get into when we set our images up here in a second. And that's about it. So that's our buttons. Okay. Now we need 3 of these. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and set up all 3 buttons right now. So I'm going to cut and paste those, and we're going to change them around. So what we can do here is set this one to 1 and this one to 2. Okay, and we're going to take the active off. We only can have 1 active. All right, and then the last thing we do is change out our real labels here. Okay, and we'll also reset the current. All right, so we'll take this current off because it's not going to be the current one, and we'll just take that off. Looks something like this. And then we'll change our labels to match what our things are going to be for today. Just do it exactly like what I'm doing, but these labels will describe the image that the person is seeing in case they're blind or reader would read this. So I'm going to change the next one to free delivery. And I'm going to say something else. Let's say use our app. How about shop with our app? Something like that. Doesn't really matter as long as it just adequately describes the image. So right now we have 3 buttons. Okay. We don't have any images yet, so nothing will show up. So let's work on that a little bit. And let's add our images, and then we'll get that previous and next working. So to do that, I've got another div here. And we're going to give it a class. Okay. And we're going to call this Carousel, O-U-S-E-L, -inner. And this will set up really our images, and that's what it's going to do. All right, now each carousel inner also has to have a carousel item. So, and these are also handled by divs inside the carousel. So make sure that your divs are inside this carousel inner. That's another common mistake, is that they get these kind of misaligned and their items don't work because they're not inside of the inner tag. All right, so we're going to give this a class, and this one's called carousel-item, and we're going to make the first one active. Okay, and we space it. I think it's a good practice to make sure that if this is set to active, that you set the correct one active in here. Okay, so we're going to do the first one, which makes it easy to remember that the first one is always active, and then it'll scroll through them as it goes. All right, and all we need to do is we're going to add an image tag in here to set up kind of what we do. Now, if you look over here, I don't have any images yet, so I'm going to grab some images. that I've already pre-made. I'm going to drag them over here. Okay. And I'll provide all of these images for you, even if you're watching inside the courseware or if you're watching this on YouTube. Either way, I'm going to provide these images to you. And you can use the images so that you can get yours looking just like mine. Now, one thing about images is I think it's a good practice to think about this and write this down or take notes that all of your images, specifically in the carousel, should be the same size. Now, there are some things that we can do to make sure that it sizes correctly, but if you want a truly pro result, make sure your images are all the same size. And I think currently at the time of this recording, 1600 width and 400 height is probably the best size to use at this point. You can experiment with what you want to do, but that looks pretty good on all sizes of desktops, even up to 4K. And then it also will scale nicely down to the smaller resolutions that you might see on your iPhone or your iPad or something like that. And that's what I've done here. I've created 3 images, and they're in 1600 by 400. And that's why my carousel looks so good across the size. So take the time to size your images on the same side. What I'm using is Photoshop, and I build out a template inside of Photoshop that's 1600 by 400. I drop the image in there, and then I scale it or size it correctly inside that template, and then save it out. If you don't have Photoshop, any kind of imaging software will work just fine. All right. So now that we have our images inside of our project here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and set one up here, and it's pretty easy. Image tag. This is standard HTML. You can see here VS Code is giving me some helpers here. So I'm going to pick our first one, which is Farm Fresh. Okay. Now the other 3 images you see in there are also have to do with our pricing page. We'll get to that in a second. Now, to make this work correctly, there are some classes that we're going to set up. Okay. I'll explain these as I go. dBlock. This means set this visible. And I want it to be width of 100, meaning take up the entire width of the page. And that's these 2 classes to make it sized correctly are required. All right. I can give it an alt, again, assistance for readers. And I'm just going to say from our farm to your table. All right. And that is, I think, about it. So what I can do is go ahead and set up multiple images in here. Boom, boom. And all I need to do is take off the active for the ones that aren't active. So I cut and paste here using Control C, and then I paste it using Control V. And then I made sure that my images are different. So I'm going to say slash, and for this one, I'm going to use the delivery option, free delivery. And I'm just going to change the alt tag here, free delivery. All right. And then I'm going to change one more here. Get rid of this. Slash, and then I'm going to pick fresh app. And you can put whatever you want here and use our app to shop. All right. So now we have this, and if we did it right, so let's run it in right click, open in live server. Check it out. So now we have our slides here. Look at that. It's kind of cool, right? Should slide if we hold it here long enough. If it doesn't, we'll fix it here. Pretty neat. All right, and so now we have this little navigator down here, and we can just pick them out. All right, so that's kind of cool. Looking just like our demo. All right, so now let's get back in our code and continue on. Let's see if we can add in those indicators on the side. All right, and then we're actually done with the carousel. So we already have a nice one, so let's add a little more features to it. Show you another thing that we can do. And these features are optional. You do not have to put this these buttons at the bottom if you don't like them. Just don't include the carousel indicators. And if you don't like the left and right arrows, don't include them. You can do whatever you want. So we're going to add another tag here, another div. Actually, we're going to make these are just buttons. And we're going to add a new button, and we're going to give it a class. And it's going to be carousel control previous. And that's required. We'll give it a type equals button. And finally, we need to give it our data BS target. This is required for it to work, and it's also required to spell it correctly. What we're going to do here, this is going to be the same way we did this one with our little hashtag here. I called mine carousel header. You may have called yours something different. Make sure you have hashtag in it. So need to add one more thing here. We're going to say data -BS, and we're going to call this slide. And we're going to call it previous. All right. So these are required. All of this is required for this to work. Now we need to give our button some visuals. So we're putting that inside the button class or inside the button tags. We use a couple span tags here. Span, and we'll say class equals, and there's some preset looks for this, so we're going to use those. OUSEL dash, and it's control next icon, or control previous icon in this case. All right, and then as long as we spelled that right, we should be good. And then we're going to say span, and we'll say class visually dash hidden. Make sure this is spelled this right. And we'll say previous. And that's it. Okay, so this is just something to set this up. And then what I want to do is copy this button. I'm going to put it right underneath it. And because I have this class in here, it's going to place it for me where it needs to be. What I'm going to do here is next. And then I'm going to have next icon. And then I'm just going to say next. Let's make sure, and then change this to next. Okay, so we've got two buttons, one with the carousel preview icon, one with the next icon. All right, and so I forgot one other thing in here. I want to go ahead and add this in here. Dash hidden equals true. Okay. This is so that the readers won't read this because it's not important. Okay. So it's hidden. So now we set these up. So if we did this right, we can go back over to our page here, and now we have these slides that are working left and right and right. Kind of cool, right? And you can see it automatically kind of scrolls with it. That's one of the things you get with the carousel. There's some JavaScript inside this, inside of Bootstrap, for us to do that. So if we go back to our code, that is how we build a carousel. So you've been building some applications, but they're not quite moving the needle in the interview process. It's probably because they're too simple. I want you to think about going to Coder Foundry to learn how to build enterprise-grade applications that will move the needle in that interview process, like our bug tracker and our blog. These are applications that are feature rich and definitely enterprise grade. And that's what you need during the interview process. So go to learn.coderfoundry.com and let's build the right apps to get you that first software job. Okay, let's just jump in and let's start building out the 3 card section that we've been working on at the bottom. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to add right here under this container. So we've got this inside this container, and we've got this carousel here. So let's collapse that. And I want to add something right under the carousel inside this container. I'm just going to say div class, and I'm going to make this a container, not a fluid, because I'm just going to center these 3 items on a page. And this will work. And so now we'll have this one like component that we can just sit in there and drop on a page if we want to use this as a template. And then what I want to do too is I want to have some separation between the carousel and my pricing page. So I'm just going to give it a PT5, which stands for padding top 5, a little space between the 2 controls, or the 2 areas. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add something like this. I'm going to add a div class row and then a div class column. And I'm just going to call it call. Now what this is doing is it's creating a row and then 1 column that will go the width of this container. And then I'm going to use some classes to tell it how to render the items inside this column. Sometimes I'm going to make it 3 if it's large, and sometimes I'm going to get 1 if it's on mobile. And we'll show you how that works in just a second. All right. So the first thing I need to do is inside of this, I'm going to start making my card. So I'm going to make a div. I'm going to say class equals card. And I'm going to make sure that the height of each card is 100. And I'm going to add a little shadow on it. You don't have to add the shadow, but I'm going to do it. Now, once we make 1 card, we're just going to duplicate them 3 times. I'm going to show you how that works here in a second. At the top of the card, I'm going to have an image, and that's how I did mine. And so I'm just going to put an image here, and source equals an image, and I've created my logos here for the top of them for my pricing page. And so my first one is the family plan. Actually, it's not the family plan, it's the individual plan, the indie plan. All right. And then I'm going to say class equals, and this tells it's a card-image-top. And alt equals individual plan. I just reads that image out. Bam. Okay. So what this class is doing is telling it on top of the card, put this image. Okay. And so that's the class that'll help us do that. Bootstrap will take care of it for us. And so we're just going to use the images that we created here. All right. So then I'm going to create our card body itself. Class equals, and it's going to be card-body. So once you've done these a couple of times, you realize that the classes that they're using are well named and easy to keep up with. All right. And inside this card body, I'm going to have an H5. I'm going to put a class on it. I'm going to call it card-title. Fairly easy. And I'm going to call it individual. Individual. And that's it. So that's my card title. And then inside that, I need some card text. So I'm going to put that in a P tag. I'm going to say class equals card-text. And inside this tag, I'm going to just say the perfect plan for just you. Get all the fresh fruit and vegetables you need without the waste. something like that. You can type whatever you want in here. It's just text, and the card text will give it a nice format for us. And what I'm going to do is also give it our buy button. Now, we don't have anywhere to go with this for now. So this would normally take you to a buy page, but I'm going to put a hashtag in here, and that'll just take it back to the current page we're on. So if someone's testing it out, it doesn't go anywhere. And I just need to give this href, this a tag, some classes to style it up. I'm going to style it as a button, and I'm going to go button success. That'll make it green. You can do whatever you want. And then the text for that button is buy. Now, one trick that I think everyone would think about when these cards is the card body. We want them to be equal heights all the time, but sometimes our text isn't doing that. But if you want to make our border around these cards to look like they're the same height, regardless of if we have 2 lines or 3 lines of text in here, here's a trick you can do. And I go class equals, and I'm going to add this new div tag here, and I'm going to give it a card footer. So add a card footer to it. You can put some information in here. You don't have to. I'll leave it up to you. And I'm going to say text-muted. You can put something in there or not, or you can leave it blank. And it'll just kind of put like a border at the bottom of it that's kind of like grayed out. And it just looks like a little design element on the bottom, but it'll make sure that all the cards are of equal height. All right. So if we did that right, let's check it out and see what happened. And then all we have to do is duplicate it. So let's go over here, open it in Live Server. All right, and see now we have a card here. It's giant because we only have 1 column in here, and so it tried to fill up all the available space. So as we add in our cards, it'll look a lot better, but it's there. So that's everything we need. So now let's add in our other cards. So what I need to do is I need to add in 2 more columns with our cards in there. So I'm just going to cut and paste this whole column with the card that we just built. And I'm going to cut and paste that one, cut and paste that one. And now all I need to do is modify them. So my first card is here. So my second card has a different image. So I'm going to just get that. So the family plan is next. And I'm going to give the alt here. Let's get rid of this right here. We don't need that. So we can see what we're doing. So I'm going to say family plan. And then I'm going to say family plan maybe, or something like that. The perfect plan for your family. And then we'll say bring the freshest fruits and vegetables to your whole family. Something like that. Whatever you feel like whatever you want to do. Again, this is going to be the same, still a buy link. This would take us to the buy page, and our footer is going to be the same. So nothing that we really need to change here for that. So I'm going to collapse this column, and then I'm going to change the third one now. All right, and we're just going to say slash, and this will be the army plan. All right, and I'm going to just do the army plan. I'm going to say army plan. And we'll just cut and paste some text here that I had from the previous build here. You have a really big family or a whole army feed. This is the plan for you. And again, simple. All right. So now we have 3 columns. So let's see what it looks like, and then let's work on this row column here. So if we go over here and look at it, we do have our 3 columns, which is kind of cool. All right. But if we look at it in mobile, it does this, and that's kind of ugly. So what we want to do, even though they're the same height, our columns here, it's just kind of ugly. What I'd like to do is stack these in mobile. All right, so let's get out of here and let's make sure they stack correctly. All right, so I'm going to go back into VS Code, and I'm just going to work on this. And this is something we can do in Bootstrap 5 that is pretty cool. And we can use something called row columns. So we can say row calls -1, and this means that always make these one column. Okay, always make them one column. So if we look over there and watch it stack, we'll see that what it's going to do is it's going to stack these on top of them like that. And that's kind of not what we want, but it does look good on mobile. It's kind of neat, right? Kind of stacked in there. So, but on the higher ones, we would like them to go across in 3s because that's what we want. All right, so let's look at that, see if we can make it stack better. So now that we have row calls 1, we also can set a breakpoint, and we can say row dash calls, and we can say anything medium and above, which is like an iPad, make it 3 columns. All right, and let's go ahead and add a gutter all the way around to kind of space out our cards there. And so when we look at it, now we have 3 columns. Then we go to mobile, and now it's stacked. And so that is the power of the Bootstrap grid system with row calls is really, really kind of powerful. And if you look at it like, say, on an iPad Pro, you can see now we have 3 columns. This is scaling really nicely. All the controls work. And all the way down to, if we go to an iPhone 6 or something like that, or iPhone X, you see it stacks and it still looks really good, and this is scaling nicely. So that is the pricing page. We built a carousel, we built some cards, and I think this is something that you may use a lot as you get out there and build pages. There's a lot of people trying to build pages like this. So that is Bootstrap cards and Bootstrap carousel. I hope this helped. Good luck and keep coding.